The subject of transcendentalism has many interpretations, and I can only give you the one that most appeals to me. There are two general approaches to the subject. One is academic and the other is non-academic. The academic phase is expounded by such thinkers as René Descartes, and the non-academic by the American transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson. So we have two schools, one founded in an academic approach and the other in a mystical approach. Now in my mind, the academic approach is false to the subject for one reason. You cannot make an academic approach to mysticism. It is itself a conflicting approach to the subject under consideration. Transcendentalism has been described as a philosophical and religious democracy. It approaches things not from the standpoint of authority, but of internal enlightenment. According to Buddha, who was in this phase of the subject definitely a transcendentalist, the individual must work out his own way of life. His directives must come from within himself. He cannot be completely under the leadership of an authoritarian religion. In other words, he cannot continue to exist within a pattern of dogmatic religious institutionalism. He does not wish to be told by some intermediary what deity wants for man. Then the Cambyses entered into the presence of the great Olympian temple. The priests came out to say to him, "We are the servants of this temple. What can we do for you?" And the conqueror said, "Whose house is this?" And the priest said, "This is the house of God." Then Cambyses says, "Man, step aside." And he went in alone. Now this, in a sense, expresses a metaphysical point of view. It is a point of view based, definitely, upon the inner experience of reality. That each person is constantly under the guidance of his own inner life. If he is early in the path of wisdom and does not have a very solid foundation, then the guidance from inside is gentle. If he is further advanced and becomes inconsistent with his own principles, then the guidance becomes more severe. And if he wanders too far from the paths of integrity, the guidance becomes dictatorial almost. But it is from himself. It is from the fact that within his own soul, the individual has the leadership of his life. Now this presents a number of interesting questions, some of which are not easily answered. First of all, we must say that from within the individual, there is a constant stream of impulses coming through into the personality. These impulses are not all right or all good. And the concept that everything that comes from the inside is good and everything from the outside is bad simply cannot be sustained by experience. The individual's release of his own internal guidance depends upon a series of preparatory disciplines. And now we can think in terms of the Neoplatonists of Alexandria and Athens. In other words, we can only bring out or bring through that which we can dominate by our own integrities. The beginning, therefore, of the inner or mystical experience of life is and must be self-discipline. Self-discipline, in this case, is not based upon an arbitrary theological point of view. This discipline is the moderation of personal conduct. It is the individual gaining gradual mastery over little things, the daily experiences of living. Discipline is not a magnificent theological adventure. Discipline is a daily, arduous preservation of principles. Unless the individual has attained discipline, he cannot depend upon the internal pressures of consciousness. He cannot take the soul guidance he needs unless he has made possible the natural and normal expression of the soul power through his daily life. If his outer living is incorrect, if he is in his daily existence inconsistent with soul principles, he then can be deceived by a variety of pressures that come not from the soul, but from the misapplication of his own mental and emotional functions. Emotion has become consistently identified with soul power, but many emotions are not soul-centered. They do not arise in the soul. They arise in environment or the appetites of the individual. Therefore, many emotions are selfish, self-centered, destructive. They come from within, but they are not soul-centered. The individual, however, cannot be liberated from the inside out. He must begin by preparing his outer life to receive the true light of soul power. He must therefore overcome the hazards which will destroy or restrict the function of the soul factor. If he has a bad temper, it is a mistake to assume that an abstract spirituality will cure this. If he is selfish, he cannot simply proceed in spite of it. He cannot hope that soul power will overcome his selfishness. He must overcome it himself before the power of the soul can function through him. He must prepare the way. He must cleanse the inside of his own cup. He must do those things in daily life which remove from his daily activities those circumstances which prevent the natural expression of the good within himself. Consequently, we find most mystics who are really serious and do really want to have a breadth of understanding, living very simple lives. One of the great Transcendentalists of the 17th century was Jacob Bernays, the shoemaker. He continued to peg shoes to the end of his life. He never made any effort to become superior, to dominate other people, or to found a sect or a cult. He shared his knowledge with a few friends, and it was not until after his death that his teachings gained general recognition. It is the same in nearly all mystical circumstances. There's no doubt in the world that St. Francis de Assisi was a transcendentalist. He was one who was moved from within himself rather than moved by the church hierarchy which dominated his physical existence. Therefore, we may say, in a sense at least, that Buddha was correct when he speaks of the universe as a cosmotheism. In other words, he tells us that existence itself is a cosmic democracy. It is not an autocracy. It is not a divine power ordering all things and human beings simply obeying. In other words, God is not a dictator. God is not pressing the individual against his own will, because the moment a person moves apart from his own will, he is no longer actually expressing himself and can take no credit for virtues that are forced upon him, even if he can practice them. But in most cases, he cannot practice them. If virtues are imposed by theology or by law, the individual secretly disobeys them. He continues in his own way, hoping that an organization or an institution or a policy can bestow the spiritual growth that he feels he requires. So in this point of view, each individual is in a sense the master of his own life. If he is not the master of his own life, then he cannot be held responsible for his actions. A person pressed to do that which he does not believe to be right is not responsible for the consequences if he has made every effort that is possible to himself to continue in a proper course of action. Cosmotheism in Buddhism is simply the realization that there are two forms of government, autocracy and democracy. Most systems of theology are autocratic, whereas mysticism and transcendentalism are actually democratic. They allow the individual to realize that when he achieves something worthwhile, the achievement is his. Basically, there is an endowment within him, which Emerson and most others have represented as being a divine capacity. The individual has within himself a spark of the infinite. He has within himself a principle, an energy, which enables him to unfold a destiny of his own. This destiny is, of course, conditioned and limited by the universe in which he exists. It is further conditioned by the environment into which he is born. He is not able to be a free agent completely, but he is able to have what Aquinas calls a limited individualism, a limited determinism, the right to choose between those things that he can choose between, that which is best for himself. But if he makes the choice himself, then it is his responsibility, his opportunity, and his consequence. If this choice is forced upon him by others, then the power to grow himself is frustrated. So we have in metaphysical transcendentalism the concept of the individual having the right, the inalienable right, to grow according to the dictates of his own conscience. He has a right to select that which is the greatest good for him. Now, it may well be that he is not able to make such a decision. He does not know what is good for himself. He does not know whether the things he wants are proper or improper. He does not know the difference between aspiration and ambition. He is not sure how much he should sacrifice of worldliness in order to attain a condition of inward enlightenment. These decisions he is not certain about. He is not aware of how far he can trust his own nature. The answer, of course, is that he can trust his own nature to a very great degree if he does not permit superficial and unimportant factors to dominate him. So the Greeks and the Egyptians placed disciplines upon the person, disciplines that were not intended to dogmatize, disciplines that were not given to him by a hierarchy in order to force virtue upon him, but disciplines to make him capable of the self-direction of his own life. One of the problems that nearly everyone has to struggle with is the difference between ambition and aspiration. Ambition is usually a very physical, very mortal type of pressure. Ambition makes us want to be a leader over others. Aspiration makes us want to be true to the self within us. Ambition, therefore, ends in worldly controls. Aspiration in the disciplines of inner life. One of the great illumines of the past pointed out definitely that one of the safeguards to prevent us from making the mistake between ambition and aspiration is to realize humility. humility